Welcome to the Outsmart Burnout podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Zarya Rubin, a functional medicine doctor, an international speaker, and a burnout badass because I've been there myself. After walking away from my own high-stress medical career, I discovered how to break free from burnout to reclaim my passion, purpose, and joy. And now I'm here to help you do the same. From science-backed tips to time-saving hacks, and hopefully some aha moments that just might change your life. So sit back, relax, and let's do this. Welcome to Outsmart Burnout, the show where we dive deep into the real stories and expert advice that shape our lives. Today, we're joined by Emma Morris, a clinical nutritionist, motherhood coach, and a leading voice in modern motherhood. With years of experience guiding moms through the challenges and triumphs of parenting, Emma brings a grounded, compassionate, and insightful perspective to what it really means to be a mother today. So whether you're a new mom, a seasoned parent, or just curious about the evolving culture of motherhood and how you fit in, this episode is going to be for you. And I don't know about Australia, but it was just Mother's Day here in the US very recently. So I am so excited for this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm beyond excited for this conversation. And we also just had Mother's Day.
Yeah, I thought that we had different Mother's Days, but
Me too.
turns out we don't. Because my sister said, yeah, no, it was just Mother's Day here as well. And I was like, oh, maybe it's Britain, like UK, that has a different Mother's
I do
Day,
think that's correct. Yes.
But hey, who knew that America and Australia on the same page when it comes to Mother's Day? But yes, so I am so curious. I mean, obviously, people ask the question, how did you get involved in this? Well, obviously, being a mom.
Yeah.
And I'm Canadian, so I'm going to say mom.
Yeah.
Totally works for me and our listeners. You know what? You're going to get used to it. Mom, it's
Yep.
all the same. It works.
Absolutely.
So how did you end up sort of deciding to move into this field and becoming an expert in motherhood and not just, being a mom yourself, but wanting to help other women, wanting to teach, wanting to share? What inspired you to take that path?
I guess if we rewind a little bit, I'll tell the quick version of the story. But I've always thought of health as holistic. And so my background spans from an initial psychology degree, and then I worked in psych for a little bit, but felt something was missing, decided to pursue personal training. So the physical side of health for a little while. And once I started that, I started studying nutritional medicine. So bringing it all together. And in that time have done a lot of also other studies in motherhood and maternal health, in nervous system study, all of that kind of thing. And the catalyst really, I was working with women for probably, I would say 6 years at least in the clinical nutrition space. Always been an advocate for women's health in general, and mental health has been a really big one. But the catalyst for working with mothers, I knew that I would always work with mothers, but I wanted to become a mother myself before really diving deep into this work. So the catalyst was the birth of my firstborn, Elkie, which was just over 4 years ago. And when I became a mum, my world shifted in the best way. It's challenging and it's beautiful and it's messy and it's chaotic and it's just an experience I can't describe with words, but I viewed the world through a completely different lens. And being in the health space already, I had this urge I was already practicing privately with nutritional clinical practice. I was a clinical nutritionist, but I had this urge to open up a space where mothers could come, and also those wanting or becoming mothers, so wanting to become a mother, so in the fertility space, in the pregnancy space, in the postpartum, and in the motherhood space. I wanted to open up a space that mothers could come in and just really release a big sigh of relief and be held and seen and supported really holistically. And that's where my clinic, Maya Mothers Collective, was born 4 ago, or 4 years ago probably. And so I opened up a bricks and mortar practice in Brisbane. And we have now 17 practitioners under our roof, ranging from nutritionists, naturopaths, acupuncturists, psychologists, lactation consultants, midwives, massage therapists. We run mothers groups, we run women's circles, and I do a lot of coaching with mums online.
Oh, so this is like a one-stop shop.
Yeah, so that's where I guess it started. And as I've progressed through my own journey, I have gone deeper and pushed further, I guess, than just the physical, right? Because whilst I've always had that background in psychology, I have just, it's always informed by my clinical practice. And I'm seeing mums who are so burnt out, and we're combining multiple modalities that I've trained in to really get them out of burnout. And that includes the physical, but it also includes the mental, emotional, the nervous system work, all of it to really get them out of that, survival state and into a better state. But it takes time. And so, yeah, I'm really, really passionate. The work that I do combines all of these principles that I've gathered over the last 15 years. And yeah, I'm so fulfilled by what I do. So that's just a snapshot, I guess, the short story of how I got here.
It's phenomenal and it's so impressive that you managed to create this huge multidisciplinary clinic all while raising a tiny one yourself. I really don't know how you did it, but hats off. And,
Yeah.
I guess we're going to dive right in to the connections between motherhood and burnout and the experience of burnout and motherhood. I burned out many times. I burned out in my medical career and I left medicine. I burned out in motherhood and well, you can't exactly leave that. So while we think of burnout in the context most often of career, and maybe it's a bad job, maybe you have a terrible boss, maybe it's the wrong fit, you can always leave, do something else, pursue a different path. But motherhood, now you've kind of signed on for the long haul, and it can feel really daunting when you're burned out, like right out of the gate. So tell me a little bit more about your process and philosophy. And when women come to you, how do you help them get out of it while still mothering full time?
Yeah. And also making sure I don't burn out, which by the
Well, yes, there's that. Obviously, being a
but
mom and a business owner, that's a whole other conversation that we can have too.
I guess that's also specifically with working with mothers in this space of burnout is I've been there as well, multiple times, just like you. I've been there, and it seemed to me, yeah, kind of no matter what I did, I'm very ambitious and driven, and I've always kind of loved the work that I've done and forged my own path, but I love it so much that I burn out. In the whilst I help women, I'm always, growing and evolving myself and making sure I've got all the scaffolding in my own life to help me and to ensure that I don't burn out because I've been there too. And I think that makes it so much more like I've had a history of depression. I've had depressive episodes all throughout my 20s. And, so I'm very passionate about burnout, but also maternal mental health. And I just think, a lot of us get into this space because we've been there ourselves, right? So, but I was curious, my brain's always wondering, but why? Why is this such a phenomenon? And as I said before, I think it really needs to be looked at. And the way that I look at, back to your question, is through multiple lenses. I think that we need to look at especially maternal burnout through many lenses because if we just look at one, it doesn't quite make sense. And so the way that I come to this work is and the way that I coach and I teach through this is there's multiple things at play here. So of course we've got the physical. We've got, the fact that we have fallen pregnant, we have grown and birthed and probably fed a baby, which in itself, many mothers, I would say most mothers in this day and age, are going into pregnancy already nutritionally depleted. And so
Absolutely.
we are going in because we're maybe burnt out before we even get pregnant. That speaks to the wider cultural scenario that's happening in the world at the moment, in the Western world. But we go into pregnancy already depleted from a physiological point of view, right? So we go in and we literally create these human beings from our own cells, from our own DNA and nutrition, and often that isn't repleted. So often that isn't recognized. We use a lot of pathology testing and using functional reference ranges for all of our clients that we work with. And if we can, we try and build them up before that. and then keep them up when they're in pregnancy. But a lot of them come to us postpartum or in motherhood, and they haven't had pathology tested for years
Yeah.
or ever since they actually, push that baby out. So that is one thing that we always look at. And I think that we just can't skip it. It is the foundation, I believe, because you can't out talk an iron deficiency. You can't therapy, go through therapy when your thyroid is, not functioning correctly.
100% agree. Yeah, which is why I've also pursued the functional medicine path
Yeah. Right.
here. So I totally agree with what you're saying and hear what you're saying. And I think some people forget that if you're nutritionally depleted in any way, or if you have borderline nutritional status, the baby is always going to take priority. So
Absolutely.
they're gonna siphon nutrients,
Absolutely.
cells, blood, every oxygen, everything away
Everything.
from the mom. And so you're going to really end up even more depleted than when you started.
Absolutely. So that's always the first thing that we tackle is doing comprehensive blood work, understanding what that mother's physiology is doing, what her hormones are doing, what her nutritional reserves are doing, because and what her blood sugar's doing as well, because that, we go through nutrition, we make sure that she's eating a well-balanced diet and making sure it's macronutrient balanced so that across the day her blood sugar's nice and beautifully balanced, because that can really affect an ability for a mother to regulate herself, regulate her emotions, her nervous system, all of that. And so that is the foundation. And then if we go deeper into that, I talk a lot about Dr. Sophie Brock's work, which she has coined something called the perfect mother myth. I'm not sure if you've heard this before, but she's a motherhood sociologist, and I've done further training with her. And this is one of the certifications I've done that really changed the way that I practice with mothers, because it really highlights the sociology of motherhood, and it helps us to understand why we are burning out so much. And that is that the perfect mother myth is this myth that basically it says that a good mum, in inverted commas, is available 24/7. She's never angry. She's always present, and she puts herself last. And so if she struggles, it must be her fault. And so this creates this, all right, like this
Sounds
guilt.
familiar. Yes.
Yeah. And so to understand this myth and to actually see this myth and how it plays out in our culture is really important, and another really foundational piece in the work that I do, because if we don't understand this myth and the way that we have really subconsciously like embedded some of these beliefs of what it means to be a good mum based on our culture and the generations that came before us that were also influenced by this myth. If we don't understand this, then we have a lot of guilt and shame that we carry, and we are constantly striving to do better because we think that it's an individual problem for us as mothers, that we're failing and we're not keeping up and we're not doing, we're not being the best mother we can. But actually, we are being measured. We are measuring ourselves up to this, impossible standard of what the good mum is, the perfect mum is. And when we fail, which we will all inevitably because we're human, we fail against this standard to be perfect, we think that it's our fault. And so we feel a lot of shame for not being enough. And then we just overcompensate to feel worthy again. And this keeps us in a burnout cycle, right? Because it's these
Absolutely.
feelings are so deeply embedded in the body, and, tight chest, clenched jaw, digestive issues, headaches, they turn up in the body, not just in the mind. And so it's really important to unpack this myth and to understand where it is, where we are seeing it, and it's everywhere. It's in the media, it's in social media when we're scrolling all these mothers that, and again, they are living out or trying to live out this perfect mother myth. And we're going, oh my goodness, how does she have it all together? How does she have a perfect life? Why can't I have the same? It must be something wrong with me. And so, yeah, we really have to understand where that is coming from. And once we do, it gives mothers the permission to step outside it and to redefine what a good mother is based on their own terms and their own values as well. So that is extremely important. And then going a little bit deeper is understanding the nervous system. So, combining those two, the nutrition, the biology, and the perfect mother myth, the society that we live in, with, okay, what is our nervous system doing? And we map our nervous system. And I use a lot of polyvagal theory here, mapping, help mothers to map their own nervous system states and for them to understand when they are in that heightened, hot state, that fight or flight state, and when they're in a cold, shutdown state, and to understand when they're in those states. And the awareness piece is the first thing that is, it's a absolute foundational piece. And then to give them the tools to start to come out of that and to start to widen their window of tolerance. And so, yeah, there's a lot of awareness here. So that's a bit of an insight into the way that I help mothers. And as you can see, it's not just physical. It's not just, okay, just eat this and you'll be better, or just take this one supplement. It's, okay, yes, that's really important. But then we go deeper into, well, what is keeping you stuck in these cycles of burnout? Because you can, supplement and you can get your iron back up and you get your thyroid working again. But if you're burnt out and stuck in a nervous system, like a dysregulated nervous system, then you're going to end up back there. And that's where this deeper work comes in.
So powerful. I love all of this. And I think that, for some folks listening, they might be able to identify with, oh, yeah, I can identify iron deficiency or, being tired or, hypothyroidism. It means you're sluggish, you've got weight gain, you're losing your hair, this and that. But, or postpartum hair loss, sure. But burnout, what does that look like as a mom? And how do you separate it from, well, I'm just up all night anyway with feeding the baby and doing all the things. And so, how do I know if I'm burned out or I'm just, see, I thought I was like, well, I guess this is just what motherhood is like. And I talked to myself through that until she was about 2 or so. And I had, florid hyperthyroidism
Mhm.
that was undiagnosed. And yeah, that was pretty severe wake up call to think that this was all normal. And I was a physician.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, my resting heart rate was like 130, but I just thought, well, I'm just anxious because being a mom is very anxiety provoking. And I had underlying anxieties. Yeah, anxiety plus hyperthyroidism. It's like a match made in hell.
Absolutely. And I think burnout sneaks up on us, and it's not just one day we're fine, the next day we're burnt out, right? As mothers,
Yes.
motherhood,
I use the frog in the boiling water analogy all the time.
right? Motherhood is innately stressful, right? Especially in those early years when our children, need so much from us, both physically and emotionally, and that sleep deprivation that we have in the first couple of years. In the first year of life, it's estimated about 700 hours of sleep that is lost. So, we're not coming out of a pregnancy and then a birth, right? So when we're quite, we're moving into motherhood. And I think the other thing here is it's so normalized, right? Even by well-meaning health practitioners, sometimes like GPs and doctors who say, "Well, it's just motherhood, you know, that's it. It's just, you just got to get on with it." And so burnout rarely presents as, "I think I'm burnt out," right?
Exactly. No, I find this so 100% of the time, I don't think anyone comes to me and says, well, I'm coming to see you because I'm burnt out.
Absolutely.
That's the catch 22. That's the irony.
Absolutely.
I didn't realize myself either. I didn't have the words for it, the language for it. It was a long time ago. So nobody
Yeah.
was talking about it. And
Yeah.
I just thought, well, I'm having a nervous breakdown or something, or I can't do my job anymore. Like I have to quit my job. That was how I rationalized it. But it was so much bigger than that.
So I think we've got to what I do is look across clinically these signs and symptoms, this manifestation of burnout through, physical, emotional, and behavioral layers, essentially. So, in terms of, cognitive and emotional symptoms, it's a feeling of, maybe racing thoughts or mental fog. I can't feel straight. I feel really scattered. I forget things. It's irritability or rage that comes up so often in motherhood. This rage that mothers have never felt before, and this feeling of shame when that comes up. And then they're modeling that to their children. I see that a lot in clinic. Flatness,
Well, then
numbness,
just wait until perimenopause.
right? Gosh, yeah,
It's a
it's a
fun
lot.
roller coaster.
A lot. I think
I was an older mom, so I just like transitioned into right into everything. I was like, breastfeeding, perimenopause, sure, whatever.
hormonal roller coaster, and that is becoming
Yes.
more common as women, move and have babies later in life. We are birthing babies and then heading into this hormonal roller coaster of perimenopause, which I feel like I could have a whole podcast conversation on that as well
Absolutely.
because it's so common. But yeah, so these emotional symptoms, these tears without clear reason, this low motivation, these shame cycles, this anxiety that, is masked as over functioning. A lot of mums who are burnt out are constantly on in their work. They're exhausted, but they're constantly thinking, that mental load, they're constantly thinking of what's next and they can't rest. They can't quieten their mind because it feels unsafe to do so. So there's those symptoms, but then there's also, the physical symptoms, and that presents as physical fatigue. It presents as sleep issues, either sleeping so much and wanting to sleep so much to not being able to sleep and having insomnia. It presents as immune system dysregulation, so getting sick all the time or finding it really hard to recover. Digestive issues, IBS, food intolerances, reduced appetite. That's a big one. Women saying to me, I can't actually have breakfast because I have no appetite. I feel sick. That to me is a really big red flag. Weight gain, weight loss, hair loss, poor wound healing, all of that kind of thing, even chest tightness and that muscle tension that just won't go away. And then we've got these nervous system symptoms. So living in this hyper state or a shutdown state, right? Mothers bouncing between anxiety or fight or flight to total numbness and freezing and being so overwhelmed by decisions, having a startle reflex or, noise sensitivity, being overwhelmed by too many noises, feeling like rest isn't safe. It isn't possible. Even like it's like, coming from this, other subconscious belief of if I stop, everything will fall apart.
Mm.
Therefore I can't, even when I do have time, when my babies are asleep or I do have a second to myself, it's filled with activity still. It's filled with cleaning, with scrolling, feeling that you can't rest. And that goes deeper into some of the subconscious work that I do around these beliefs that we've internalized around resting and what that means as a mum. Like a mum doesn't rest, she continually outpours, right? She doesn't stop. But yeah, there's a heap of other symptoms, disconnection from the body and not being able to sit with what your body is telling you through your menstrual cycle, through the way that your heartbeat is beating, through the way that your cognition is functioning. All of these things are signs and they all come together to create this burnout picture. I see a lot of, like, clinically in pathology, and you would as well, I see a lot of these signs and symptoms come up, and it's often nutritional depletion, insufficiencies or deficiencies. And again, like as I said before, you can do so much to push these up, but then often they come straight back down when we stop the supplementation or, the protocol to get them back up. Blood sugar dysregulation. So going, being on a blood sugar roller coaster, and it's not even about what you're eating. It's, that stress, that adrenaline and cortisol that is pushing that blood sugar up and down. Thyroid panels are showing like hyper, there's autoimmunity that comes in there as well. So yeah, there's lots of different ways that we can look at burnout. And unfortunately, it's not a blood test where you just go, oh, I'm just going to do the burnout blood test.
Right. There's no one thing to check. I mean, yeah, that's the thing. Cortisol can be low, cortisol can be high. Cortisol changes in a 24-hour period. So yeah, we check it at different times, and
Absolutely.
yeah, there's a lot to factor in, and I think that that is a really important piece that often gets overlooked, that yes, there is this physiological component and there's no test for it. I mean, there's a million tests that you can run and they may show things, they may not. And then there's the mental component, and there's the behavioral component, and then there's the interplay with social media that we see now in modern motherhood. I think that I started to get addicted to my phone, in the middle of the night when you're just scrolling and you're up and you can't get back to sleep and you're on your phone, and then that prevents you from sleeping even further, and then it becomes this vicious cycle, and we're really not even sleeping when we could be sleeping. I'd be talking to my family in Australia.
Right? And that's it. And it's like, I always say this is not a knowledge problem. because we have, I mean, of course, there's the deeper knowledge around how the body works and the physiology and all of that. But I think there's so much knowledge available. There's so much, so many resources available to mothers. Thank you to the internet and social media and whatnot. Is that we get so overwhelmed with that, and it's not
Yeah,
that.
it's an information overload. There's almost too much just to sift through and to try to find the information that is applicable and that's helpful to you right there in that moment when you're desperate. Because I don't
Exactly.
think moms really have a lot of bandwidth to be researching. And, of course, they're researching like, my kid has this rash. Oh my gosh. But they're not researching necessarily, oh, I'm not feeling great. It's like, well, that's fine.
Yeah,
I'll let that go. I just have to push through. I just have to carry on and it'll be fine because there's really no other option. I think there's this mentality of this is it. There's no other way. There's no way to change. There's no way for things to be different. When in reality, that's part of the healing as well, is to show them that, yeah, you know what? There are ways to do things differently. Now, they might not be what you think. And for me, it was like, yeah, it wasn't sure as heck wasn't sleep training 'cause that did not work for my kid. It was not going back to work, It was like, well, okay, so I am gonna be a stay-at-home mom. Not what I envisioned, not what I planned, not what I wanted, but that is what ended up working for our family, and that was, hugely stressful as well, but you have to just kind of figure out, well, how can you puzzle piece this? How can you create a different environment or a different pattern or a different structure so that you're not doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results because you're just going to burn out again and again.
absolutely. And that's why I've really, in the last few years, implemented these deeper strategies, because it's not like, unfortunately, our culture, we want a pill for a nil, right? We want one pill or supplement that's going to take everything away, and we want it yesterday. And so a lot of my work is sitting with women and doing this comprehensive assessment on what all of the symptoms that I've just talked about, and understanding their nervous system, understanding their physiology and how that's working, understanding their thought patterns, their beliefs, and what they have internalized. And a lot of this also comes, like, individually, personally, it comes from these subconscious beliefs that we've formed as children and how we were parented. Like, there's so much that goes in it. And actually sitting there saying, you're burnt out. Like, and that might be the first time that they hear that. And it's not, as I said, it's not just a blood test, but and then it's like, they're like, okay, well, and a lot of these women are high functioning. They really want to achieve, and they're driven, and they've come from really, ambitious careers. They're like, well, how do I fix it? What's the supplement?
Mhm.
What's the herbs that I take?
What more things can I do?
And it's like,
And
oh,
I'm like, well, okay, we actually have to work on doing less.
yeah, right. And
Do
feel
one thing less.
and, really to rewire our systems, our nervous systems, to feel safe doing less. Because for a lot of us, when we slow down, we feel unsafe. And that has been something that we've been conditioned to truly believe. So yeah, it's a big conversation, and there's a lot of emotion that I do find from mothers when we have these deep conversations, and I'm piecing together all of their signs and symptoms, their pathology, all of the things, and saying, actually, you're burnt out. Something's got to give here. We need to work on this. And I'm sorry to tell you, but it's going to take at least, months to do
Right,
this work. And it's going to
right.
take, this time to unravel. And it's not like, of course, beautiful adaptogens and nutrients and these, and food and all of these things are so important, but they're one piece of the puzzle. We need to understand more deeply so that we can rewire your system, your beliefs, and help you to cultivate a life that won't continually burn you out. And and that's what I do now. Like, I've got coaching containers that run for minimum 3 to 6 months. And
Yeah.
women go, well, that's a long time. Like, of course it is, but
Well,
it means
that's what it takes.
but
Yeah.
no. But, like, that's what is required here to really tackle all of these different areas that we've talked about in this conversation, right?
So, what are some of the beliefs or limiting beliefs that women come in with that are predisposing them to
Yeah.
develop burnout or to stay stuck in burnout?
I think as mothers in particular, it's really important to understand, going back to that, what do they believe makes a good mother, right? And this comes from a generation before us, all the generations before us actually, who were very self-sacrificing, right? So it was in order to be a good mum, you had to put your needs last. You had to self-sacrifice. You had to be, that martyr. That's martyrdom and motherhood. So I guess a lot of us, again, completely, and it's not about blame, it's like what we have internalized as we've grown up, as we've watched our own mum. And again, everyone's different here, but as we've watched these mothers before us completely self-sacrifice because they had no other choice and because they had to in their generations to survive. And that's what they were taught to do, right? But we are in this stage now where we get to say, hang on a second, that's not the narrative that I want to carry forward because that is a recipe for burnout. And so the beliefs here that we see are things like, I don't want to burden anybody. If I don't do it, it won't get done right. It's easier just to keep going rather than to stop and to have to ask for help and ask others to rely on. We're living in this of hyper independence. I feel guilty for asking for help. And if I do ask for help, that means that I'm not a good mom because I should be able to do it myself. My mum had, people go often reference their own mothers and how many children they had, and she did it by herself. But I always remind them that actually the culture that we are living in at the moment is vastly different to the culture that our parents and grandparents lived in. And so, the pressures that
It's
we have
so
today,
isolating,
it's
and
so
there is no
isolating.
village, there is no help. I think sometimes having a lot of kids is actually easier in a way because they all help and they all entertain each other and they play. When you have one child, it's like that child is demanding your attention 24/7 and that's it. And when you're the default parent, I mean, nobody else really can help because the kid's not gonna want them.
Exactly. Exactly, and that's the nuance that you've gotta take into account, and also not to mention that financially, the climate is that most families or the majority of families do have to have a dual income from both parents, so it's not just a, "Oh, yeah, I'd like to work." It's, "No, no, no, both mother and father have to work," and so that looks vastly different for childhoods and where then I don't know about over there for you guys, but in Australia, like, the cost of childcare is extremely high.
It's exorbitant here. Yeah, I mean, there's really not a lot of subsidized care. We have no paid maternity leave. We have no maternity leave. Like it's
So
crazy here, it's family first is such a, euphemism in name only. I mean, it really has nothing to do with families and motherhood. It's just
yeah,
empty rhetoric.
right? And so we live in this culture that demand like, we need to work, we need, to a lot of us, we need to, we've got these phones that connect us 24/7. The lines between work then and home are also blurred because we've got these phones that we
Yeah.
and then it's like, "Oh, someone could email me at 11 p.m., and if you wanna reply to that, then you can." And so it kind of like those boundaries are really blurred. Whereas back in the day, they didn't have mobile phones, and once you left work, you left. So it was, there's a lot of differences there that I think that we forget about when we are measuring ourselves up against the mothers that came before us. And not to say that the previous generation had it easy, because they didn't. It was just different challenges, right?
I mean, I think that the standards of motherhood too have become almost unachievable. I mean, you look at, TV shows like Mad Men and the kids are in the crib, the moms are in another room or out of the house smoking and having martinis in the afternoon. I mean, and that was completely normal back then. And I mean, that would never happen today. I mean, for good reason, but it was a different culture. And now it's like your child, you know, has to have an enriched environment and has to be learning and stimulated and 24/7, and you have to be playing with them the right way and have the right toys and have the right supplies and the right baby equipment and this and that, and like otherwise you're a bad mom. And it's really easy to fall into that kind of trap. I think that there's just another thing that's going to be helpful when you don't have that help and support of community.
And you know what you're speaking to there, and I don't know if whether you've come across this before, but the intensive mothering ideology. Have you heard of that before?
Mhm. Yeah, explain for our listeners, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So Sharon Hayes has this intensive mothering ideology where, again, we put a word and a name to it, but what that is it's this belief that I need to give my children everything that I have, and I need to be on the ground playing with them at all times, even if they're 7 weeks old, and I need to be reading to them all the time, and I can't self-care and all of that. And so it's we are again like internalizing this, and we're putting the pressure on ourselves to be there. And this thing that I always say is that we're putting the pressure, and culturally the pressure is on to mother like we don't have a job and work like we don't have a family, right? And it's just
It's
impossible. It's
not
just
not sustainable, not doable.
we think, oh, but we can have it all, and so then we try to do that. And again, that is one of the dominant things that will fuel burnout, right? This belief. So that's why it's so important, coming back to those beliefs that I see in mothers, like they're deep, they run deep, and they are very subconscious. So, actually understanding those and understanding even where they came from. Sometimes with some clients, we do some like neuro linguistic programming work, and we understand a little bit more and help to reframe those beliefs. And yeah, it's really, really important. And it's a huge part of the picture here that I don't think is being talked about enough, to be honest.
Mm, yeah, I'm having some deep thoughts myself during this conversation just about the fact that, I walked away from a very big career and, I was a physician and I was an executive and this and that and in the business world and I left these things to raise a kid. And so, well, I better be the best damn mother that this world has ever seen because of all the things I gave up. So I'm like, I'm going to be a professional mother. You just watch. And like that is exhausting. And then of course we haven't even talked about, there's parenting, a neurotypical kid who doesn't have any medical challenges and there's parenting kids who have challenges. My daughter is, neurodivergent and has medical issues. And so it is like a full-time job on top of a full-time job on top of a full-time job. And it's really hard to manage all of that. And then it's also not, I think that there's a huge problem in society with motherhood just not being valued. It is just not seen as something, it's an afterthought. It's like, well, of course you're mothering, you're a mother,
Yeah.
whatever.
The work of mothering is severely undervalued, but the work of mothering keeps the world turning.
Yes, and it's the most important work of our lives because it is literally creating the next generation. And, when that goes awry, we see what happens.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
Oh, and this has been so fascinating and informative. And I think there's just so much food for thought. I think if there's a message that you want every mom who's listening to this episode to walk away with, there was something you could say to them that would be helpful in the moment. Either if they're overwhelmed and they're not sure if they're burned out or not, or if they know that they're burned out and they're struggling, they're not sure what to do, what could you leave them with today?
I think first and foremost, if you find mothering hard, it's because it is, right? Like the validation of like you are not alone in your struggles if you feel like you are struggling. And I think that is the most important message in that there is nothing wrong with you. You are not broken. You are mothering inside a system and a world that was not set up for you. So to understand that first, which then hopefully eliminates some of that guilt and shame. And then secondly, if you feel like you're not yourself, if you have lost yourself, if you are feeling maybe that you're burnt out, I would say go to someone who can help and at least start by getting your blood work done to understand, what is going on that physiological level. And there is help available. And this is the work like this. There's a lot of, I post a lot on Instagram about this topic. And I think some mums kind of roll their eyes sometimes saying like, sound, sounds nice, but
Mm,
how is that actually, we don't believe there's an actual, I guess, cure, or I hate the word cure, but, a way to feel different. And I argue that and say, no, I think there is. I think it lies
absolutely.
in yourself more deeply. And I think over everything, this work is that I guide mothers to is coming back to self. and coming back to remembering who you are behind all of the hats that you wear as mother, as whatever else, daughter, as friend, sister, business owner, employee, whatever it is. You wear many hats, but you've got to come back to yourself. And that's, again, it's so important to come and back and sit with yourself. And so yeah, I think that validating that struggle is really, really important, but also saying that there is help out there. And I
I
know
mean,
that in my heart and soul because I'm living this life and I'm helping mothers day in and day out to understand themselves better and to come out of that struggle. So it is possible.
the work you are doing is just so important. And I am just so thrilled to have had you on the show. And I think that for the moms in your area who are able to get this support and this help, such comprehensive care for moms that deals with, the physiology, that deals with the mental, the emotional, the whole picture, the total package. And that's just brilliant. And I think it's just so important. I mean, we say that when a child is born, it's like a mother is born as well, and it's a new identity, and you are not going to be the same person, and that's okay. But it can also feel like you'll never get that person back or those parts of yourself, and you will, you can. It's just you're never going to be quite the same. You're going to evolve, and that's a beautiful thing. It's a wonderful thing, but you have to evolve in the right way, and you can't leave yourself behind. Because, if the mother's left behind, then the child's left behind as well, because we can't care for them if we don't care for ourselves. That's so
Hard.
amazing. I am so glad that we had this conversation. And I think that we could probably have 20 more. And, I think that for folks who can't work with you in person, obviously for folks who are in your area in Brisbane, that's wonderful. But for folks who were inspired by this conversation, who felt a little bit more seen and quite possibly want to learn more or get a little bit more support, I don't know what you offer for folks online or through your Instagram. Let us know how people can connect with you. Moms can connect with you.
So my Instagram is just my name, so at emmamorris.co. And I run motherhood coaching containers. And so that is all online. And so we actually do
Brilliant.
have some people from overseas. We have from New Zealand. We have a couple of other overseas clients in that container. So it's absolutely possible. And obviously the timeframes are just a little bit different, but we've made it work. And so that is a way that I can work, worldwide with clients. But even before that, I've got some free resources from my Instagram. I've recorded a masterclass on burnout in motherhood, which breaks this down. It goes for 2 hours because I couldn't shut up. So there's lots of juicy details in that. And yeah, you'll find a lot of education and resources on my Instagram and my clinic. We do online telehealth services for some of the practitioners there too, and that's mayamothers.collective. So that's where I hang out.
Well, fabulous. I love it. And I hope you had a wonderful Mother's Day. Mine
Thank
was
you.
pretty good, but as usual, I did most of the work. But that's okay.
I could talk about Mother's Day for a long time.
Well, maybe before next year we'll have to record another episode. We'll get it on the books. So if you
Yeah,
enjoyed the show, if you love this conversation, share it with someone, share it with a new mom or somebody that you know who's expecting. They could probably benefit from this conversation. Don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review. It really does help to let other women discover the show, other women who are looking to outsmart burnout, and let us know what you think. If you leave us a fabulous review, we might just read it on the air. So until next time, remember, burnout isn't your destiny. It's your wake up call.